Well, hello everyone, Bridget Cook-Burch here, and I am so excited to reintroduce you to one of our favorite authors, Hannah Rose-Lyon. And Hannah, you have a second book coming out. So would you give us what this book is all about and explain all the deliciousness of it?
Yes. So I'm the author of the Freedom for Rhethos trilogy, and the second book that I'm here to talk to you about today is called The Strings of Fate, and it is following The Rebel and Violet. And it takes place right after the end of the first book, where we get to meet up with our heroes after the end of the sudden siege of Lorington. And Will and Angelyn are now forced to face an unexpected enemy in their fight for freedom, and that is hunger. Now their supplies are dwindling, they are facing a town that they need to bring into their cause very quickly, and Will is tempted with going toward the direction of violence instead of diplomacy. Now there's a mysterious illness, a plague within this city that is tied to the blood goddess that really complicates the rebels' plans. It makes it so Will has to choose between promises he's made to his people and promises he's made to his daughter, with the rebellion itself hanging in the balance. So as he and Angelyn work together, deepen their relationship, they are now trying to figure out how they can avoid becoming like the monsters that they're fighting against.
Ah, so intriguing. And what I loved was in the world building, how we just got a more expansive view of both continents and more of how their stories enmesh, which is fantastic. Devaki is one of my favorite characters, and I absolutely love her along with her father, and he's really facing some inner battles as well as some outer battles. So will you share with us, did your characters have any surprises for you in this second book? Places where they took you that you weren't expecting?
That's a great question, because when I talk to people about trilogies and famous trilogies that are out there, I often hear that the second book is everybody's favorite, because they love the setup and they love putting themselves into the magic of that world at the beginning of the story. But when you get to the middle, it's where everything deepens. Everything is more complicated, the stakes are higher, and the background that you want from characters to learn where they've come from, to understand why they are the way that they are, all of that gets to be born within the second book. So I did discover a lot of things that I wasn't expecting, and that was really learning how you can make progress as a person, as a character, with the people that you meet, but it's very easy to slip back into old habits. And even though you want your heroes to climb and succeed and to face all these challenges you're giving them, sometimes they still mess up. And they disappoint themselves, they can let down the people around them, and yet in their minds they have this incredible justification of their actions. And that's mirrored in both heroes and villains. You know, teenagers in the story and parents in the story, they're all trying to figure out, okay, what do I do with the depth of this chaos that I'm now surrounded by? And that, I think, was really fun to discover as I got further into the world that I was sharing in the second book.
And you mentioned this villain that they weren't expecting. So all of a sudden it's this hunger that they're facing. What do you find in humanity, in humans, and in your own characters that happens when hunger is at play, along with already chaos and magic and turmoil and rebellion? I
think that it's fascinating when the antagonist that you put in front of your reader isn't just a physical person. So the complications of politics and diplomacy and people who need to be taken care of, who haven't been taken care of. And that kind of brings in the skill sets of my heroine, who at first, in our first book, was stuck in a place where she was very comfortable being unhappy. And having to break that open and put her in a situation where she has the choice, to expand those skill sets. You know, working in an inn, working as a trader, working as a single mother, she has the ability to say, yeah, I can help feed these people. I can help make a decision that puts me in a leadership role that's entirely unexpected. But how can I do it in a way that's different than anyone else has ever done before, so that we're breaking new ground, we're setting more reliable trade routes, we're creating trust between the people who have worked beneath those who have used them for years. And when everybody's hungry, everybody needs to find a way to reach that common ground. And so she gets to dive into that challenge and take that task on to help these people.
Well, and I liked it when her son said that he's seen what happens to people when they're hungry, because he used to help serve at the inn. And now here's this whole entire camp that they're needing to make sure gets fed, and a city under siege and other things. And so tempers flare, politics become even more extreme. Yeah. So fascinating. And I loved that in the world building too, that you took from your first book so many unusual themes. And so you have this beautiful world, but we can see it and hear it and smell it and taste it and feel all of these things. And then you have expanded it to such a degree. What I loved was watching the development of the characters expand as your world expanded. And you're so good at the crises. You're so good at the conflicts and each character trying to figure out how they're going to take something to personal resolution. And then there's this bigger, wider issue that they're all facing. And everybody's got their own agenda. So what else did you discover as you were working on this one? Were there anything that you had to face inside of yourself as you were working on the second book?
The time period in which you as an artist create your writing and create your story, it's an imprint of who you were when you were writing those words. So I find that the second book is a place where I dealt with some of the worst depression in my life, because I wrote it through the years that I was having both of my children. And I struggled with a lot of judgment and a lot of shame that I wasn't expecting because of the way my children were born, because of the culture that I lived around. And I found that I needed to do something with all of that to be able to process from it and heal from it and be able to move beyond it so I could be the mom that I wanted to be. So I put a lot of that energy, a lot of that depth into the story. And because of that, there are some really deep challenges for my heroes here, where I break a lot of them down to the lowest that they could potentially be. And that hurts. But I felt that at the same time. And I wanted to reflect that in my characters because it was necessary for me to go through as a person so that I could be bigger and be better after it. And it's necessary for them because they're a reflection of me and a piece of me. So to be able to capture that emotion and put it into the story, one of my acknowledgments in the book is postpartum depression. I wanted to acknowledge on the other side, to thank that process of my life that I wasn't expecting to be so difficult, but turned out to be. I wanted to acknowledge that and shift that and put that into the story, because one of the biggest pieces of my writing I've always wanted to share is that fiction can be an escape, but it's also a piece of us that we need to take back into the real world. So the relevancy of that and the emotion of that translates back to our lives, and that's always been very important to me.
And in this case, I would say powerfully done on a personal level, and then also what we're facing in the world at large. You did that in your first book, and then in the second book, I'm seeing that to such a degree. I must say that I was so taken by some of those personal shatterings of your characters. Some of the most eloquent writing I've ever read anywhere. and the depth of emotion and the depth of, when I betray another person, or I omit information, or I've done this thing for my people, but I've put someone else at risk. And then how, the past can shatter us, a current situation can shatter us. That was so, I'm serious, it was so exquisite, so beautifully written. And in multiple characters for different reasons. And so really well done on that. I would also like to ask you how you see this decision of, are we going to be the same kind of monsters as the people who have been oppressing us for centuries, just because we're now in the state of having some power? And so, do you also see that taking place in the world? Is it something that you extrapolated from, or that you see, this is also addressing what I'm seeing in the world today?
It comes from just a love of more gray characters that are more interesting to create than different black and white heroes. Just seeing how a different person from different circumstances chooses to walk that line, and which side they often stumble to. And by the end of the day, what was worth it? How can you sleep at night? How can you justify things? How can you be at peace like you want to? So that is always one of my favorite things to explore when I'm diving into both heroes and villains.
The writing of this allowed you a beautifully eloquent expression of some things that you were facing as you were writing. And has it also helped with the healing on the other side? Because I see you with those sprites, and you have so much fun with them on a daily basis and a weekly basis, and your posts and how much you absolutely adore and love your children. And so that was never at issue, but what was the culture you were in, and then this depression that you were facing. So in the writing of this, have you felt like you've been able to also come out on the other side of that depression?
Yes. Though there are chapters in this book I still struggle to look at. I don't know if I'll ever do them live at a reading anywhere. They're pieces that were necessary, but aren't things that I would regularly make part of my life, but they're part of my journey and those characters' journeys. But to me, it's important to make an imprint of that piece of my life, because I could have given up. I could have succumbed to that mental health struggle and made it, writing is something that would never have been a priority anymore, something that was just a hobby that I now get to let go of. But thinking of my children and thinking of the people who've enjoyed the first book in my series so much, that beautiful accountability that comes with sharing your writing with the world and starting that story, I knew that it was something that would help me and then could potentially help other people. The depth that comes from sharing that struggle and knowing I've overcome it, and then having it proof to my children as well that, this is something that their mother didn't let go of, that helped her, that got her through something, and then is a symbol of that for them to be able to take and enjoy when they're older. Absolutely.
I loved the video of you opening the case of your first book coming out, and how your children were like, "Is it here, Mommy? Is it here?" And you open it up and you get to hold it, and they're holding it, and it's such a beautiful example of going after your dreams as an author, but also as a mother and a parent. And I love how you how things are so meaningful to you, and things are meaningful in story and in words, but you also then take that out into life in such a beautiful way. So wonderful. Hannah, tell us about your writing process. So how do you've been building a world since you were in junior high. How do you bring it to life on the page? You work with a lot of authors who really struggle to get it from here out into the fingertips and onto that page. What is your process?
The foundation is a great writing group. Always starting with those people who understand you, understand your goals, and want to work with you and see you get better. I've had two incredible women who have stuck with me over the years, up and down through that depression, up and down through growing my business and growing my relationships and all of these things happening in life. We've supported each other the whole time. So that has been the foundation of having someone there who's willing to be accountable for you and is willing to push you even if you don't want to be pushed sometimes. So,
and tell the truth too.
Yes.
Because you've often mentioned, they didn't like this chapter. I'm gonna have to take it back to the drawing board. So.
Yeah. Knowing when to cut, knowing when to expand, knowing when you can be better and challenge yourself more. That's definitely the key. And then the other thing is ultimately balance. Is just knowing that you have those people who are there to support you if you keep them in your life, if you reach out to them when you need them, but the balance of valuing what you do for yourself as an artist versus what you do as a mom versus what you do as a businesswoman. It is possible to make all those things work. Sometimes it happens at 5 o'clock in the morning and setting the tension the night before saying, I'm going to get up and I'm gonna write for 30 minutes or an hour before the baby's awake. And if I write a paragraph, fine. If I just explode a beautiful chapter all over the place, that's even better. But just giving yourself that permission to put that there because ultimately it serves you. And I tell that to my writers all the time, and I have to tell it to myself all the time, that accountability, making sure that's still a thing, because there's no way for you as an artist with a message to ever find the peace you deserve if you keep it inside of you. So I stopped putting that aside. I stopped making that magic inside of me dwindle. That spark was something that I knew I had to let out, that I got to express, and that ultimately made it so I could create that balance and make time for the writing and make time for the editing and turn it around into a beautiful book that you all get to enjoy very soon.
Yes, and this second book, I just have to tell you, is one I love series, and I love high fantasy series, so things with magic in them absolutely compel me. This one, because of the depth and the breadth of the characters and the crises that they face, both inner and outer, to me, it's one of the most tremendous books I've ever read. Really enjoy it. So this balance that you're talking about and being able to, bring these things out into the world, I have noticed that you have an ability to celebrate. So Hannah recently became a #1 national bestseller and an international bestseller, and was able to put that ribbon on her book. And then she did a series of things to celebrate. So tell us about your celebrations. How do you celebrate when you've done something and you're excited, and you also want your daughters to see that this is also part of the balance and part of life?
The main celebrations in my house are dance parties. So that happens very often on a regular basis, just to let go of things, and then on a celebratory term when things start to actually go out into the world, especially my own story. So that was a huge celebration for me. It's just being able to put on our favorite record and dance in our new home and open our first box of my books together and see what that looks like. But one thing that I did do for my first book launch was to look for a present for myself, something that I wanted to be able to gift to myself on that day. And there is an item in the story that my hero gives to my heroine that belonged to his mother. And it's something very special to him. And I wrote the description of it perfectly many, many years ago. And through all the edits and all the shifts of that story, that description never changed. And I found someone in the real world who was able to recreate what that was, and it was this beautiful raw amethyst necklace. And so I thought, if I could find that physical representation of something that I could hold on to and give that to myself on my book launch, that would be all that I would need. So I actually have it.
She's
So
wearing it today.
this wonderful artist creates these necklaces for me, for my readers, and it's just been really beautiful to say I made it to the point where I could share this book, that I could celebrate this book, and to be able to physically have something to remind me of it felt very important to do.
So you had the in-person celebrations and dance parties, and then also a gift for yourself in celebration. That is wonderful. Hannah happens to be an extraordinary editor as well as an author. And you mentioned this, being able to run a business and be an author at the same time, and be a mom, and be a beautiful wife. And so tell us the greatest gift you have found from balance.
I think the only way you can balance yourself successfully is with a support system underneath you. Having a good business partner, having a good writing coach, and having a good life partner is ultimately what makes it so whenever I stumble one way or the other and I feel off balance, I have those people in my life who are there to help steady me, to make me recognize that all those pieces of who I am are important. None of them should be neglected. They should always be honored. And so my husband is someone who ultimately makes that possible every day, where I'm working full time, I'm writing as much as I can, I'm being present with my children, and I don't think I could do that all by myself. I know there are people who do, but I don't know if I could. So to have him there for that's the greatest realization and gift that I've realized is having that partner who makes the balance achievable.
And enjoyable.
Yes.
And enjoyable, because I noticed that he celebrates you so deeply and broadly as well. Hannah, what would you want people to know about this book?
Ultimately, The Strings of Fate is about making mistakes and about the illusion that you had of a control over your life, a control over the outcome of what you want. Even the faith you might have in something can be completely shattered. And the loss of that control and the mistakes that you can make because of it will set you on a path that you'd never expect. Those are pieces of life that we often don't like to acknowledge. The biggest mistakes that we made and the biggest darkness that we're forced to face, often because of the mistakes that we made. Those are the moments that we often don't write about and we don't share. And yet, when you see characters struggle with that, and you see some of them fall into that darkness and they don't come out of it, and you see some of them choose to regress into it and may potentially stay there, and then you see others who face that challenge and rise above it, you get all of those different dynamics in this story. All of those different pieces come out in my heroes and my villains. So that's one of the juiciest pieces that I think people will ultimately take away from this book.